I'm Steve Grundman. I'm the M.A. and George Lund Fellow here at the Atlantic Council. Our purpose today is to hear from Dave Zolet, who's the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the North American Public Sector business of Computer Sciences Corporation, CSC. He'll be making an address entitled Information Technology and the Future of Defense. Dave's will be the fourth address in this speaker series entitled Captains of Industry, the Atlantic Council Captains of Industry series. The series aims to create the preeminent platform from which senior executives whose businesses contribute to national security can address the public interests their companies serve and the public policies that shape their markets. Today's address will be no different. We launched this series in October, just to make a quick review, with an address by the Chief Executive of Excelis, Dave Melcher. It was followed in November by an address from Linda Hudson, the now former Chief Executive of BAE Systems Incorporated. I was about to say last month, but now it was January, Ellen Lord, who's the CEO of Textron Systems, made an interesting address entitled The View of Defense from a Conglomerate, calling for perhaps a bit of a back to the future, or at least the virtue of a back to the future structure of the defense industry that is more commingled with the commercial industrial base than the industry that, than the mainstream of the industry that we have today. So I'm going to introduce Dave in a moment. He's going to give an interesting discussion that touches on, among other things, these, I tend to say sexy topics with words like cloud computing, big data analytics, and cybersecurity. But before I do that, I want to take a moment, again, as I have at the beginning of each one of these addresses, I want to take a moment to explain the particular impetus for this series and to put it in the context of the Atlantic Council's mission and the work of the Brent Scowcroft Center on International Security in particular. So the impetus for this series is twofold. First, there is the recognition that the business or marketplace of defense is a vital thread in the overall fabric of U.S. national security and the national security of its allies in the Atlantic Alliance and partners around the globe. Indeed, it can be said that this proposition was also central to the establishment here at the Council of the M.A. and George Lund Fellowship, which I hold. The second impetus for this series is the recognition that the marketplace is at an inflection formed by the confluence of several factors which together mark the end of the post-Cold War era, I would argue, and indeed the beginning of something new, my working title of which is The Age of Austerity. Chief among these factors for the defense industry are the fiscal crises that are reducing investment in national defense by nearly every national capital represented here today, certainly. Though the fiscal year 15 defense budget and federal budget that was released yesterday suggests that we may be at the bottom of a cycle of budgets for defense that have been declining since fiscal year 2010. Nonetheless, there is no expectation of a particularly strong ramp in increased spending. I think the fiscal crisis that is a main element of this age of austerity is still with us and still a chief factor in what we would regard as an inflection in the marketplace for defense. But in addition to that, there is the fact that allied militaries, of course, are now receding from more than a decade of counterinsurgency wars, our nation's military most especially. And this despite the fact that many of the sources and expressions of these conflicts continue to percolate throughout the Middle East and South Asia, I dare say, maybe even in Eastern Europe now, adding to that list. I would add further to this list of factors that mark an inflection in the marketplace, the advance of commercial technologies, certainly what I regard as commercial technologies, in especially computing, sensing, communications, biotechnology, to name just four such disciplines, technologies that are transforming the leverage and locus, as I would say, of threats and antagonists. This is an entire theme which I want to give a call out to my colleagues in the Strategic Foresight Initiative, one of the other practice areas here at the Council. It's an entire theme that they are cultivating. Indeed, we're going to hold a conference here. Permit me to plug a conference that my colleagues and I at the Strategic Foresight Initiative are holding on the 14th of May, specifically about how future technologies, these transformational technologies of the 21st century are going to change the future of warfare. That's 14 May. And the particular attraction so far is that the conference will be keynoted by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey. Finally, factors marking the inflection. It must be said that the particular growth story that inspired the capital markets' support for the post-Cold War restructuring of the defense industry is at an end. It's hardly to say the defense industry's stock is out of favor in Wall Street. It's simply to say that the proposition, the risk-reward proposition that is attracting investment now is really quite different than it was in the heyday of mergers and acquisitions, say, restructuring of the industry. So a little bit about the now institutional context for this series here at the Atlantic Council, because I won't want to presume that all of you in the room, let alone people who may be watching through our stream, know that much about the Council and the Scowcroft Center. So again, permit me to take a minute to add that piece of context to my introduction. So the series is an initiative of the Council's Scowcroft Center, which is a further expression of what its namesake, General Brent Scowcroft, had in mind for this center. The Scowcroft Center, of course, is the home here at the Council for its longstanding attention to NATO, and now the regional and functional security challenges facing the U.S., its allies, and its partners. The Captains of Industry series is an initiative of the Center's Emerging Defense Challenges practice, which I run, a practice whose mission is to cultivate a transatlantic constituency for practical solutions to problems that lie at the intersection of defense ministries and industries. Commercial firms that design and build innovative products and services are an important part of the U.S. and allied response to the national security challenges our societies face, and so it is only fitting that the Scowcroft Center should want to host a speaker series that features the voices of business leaders to address these very concerns from their perspectives. One expression of the importance of this series and its place here at the Council is the fact that this series has been attracting a large number of the Council's directors, three of whom are here today or will shortly be here. And forgive me if I'm overlooking someone, but Sherry Goodman, Martin Van Heuven, thank you, Martin, and Paula Stern, three directors who have been regular attendees and whom I expect here today. So let me finally, with all of that predicate behind us, introduce Dave and welcome him and thank him for coming to make this address. Dave Zolet is Executive Vice President and General Manager of CSC's North American Public Sector Business, a $5 billion, roughly, business unit that provides solutions and services to support the missions of federal, state, and local government agencies. Before being named to this position in June 2012, Dave was President of Strategic Business Development for North American Public Service Sector. Before joining CSC, he had a whole nother collection of careers at IBM and Northrop Grumman. Before now welcoming him up to the stage, I just want to add one impetus to his address. His address again on information, technology, and defense. And that is off of a conversation that I participated in earlier this morning with a group of colleagues and friends who were talking specifically about yesterday's release of the Quadrennial Defense Review and the publication, submission of the fiscal year 2015 defense budget. And I picked up on a comment that retired Marine Corps General Jim Cartwright, former Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, made at the very end of our discussion. And it was this, and I will not do justice I surely will not do justice to what Jim had in mind here, but here's how it sounded to me. That for us to maintain the technological advantage, which has been a key part in some broad sense of national security strategy of the United States for certainly 50 years, for us to maintain that advantage over a period of time when I think of necessity, not least because of the diffusion of advanced technologies around the world, the ability to do that, to maintain that advantage and even lengthen that advantage relative to the rest of the world will grow harder and harder. To do that, Jim points out that it's not going to be platforms and hardware. It's not these advantage, in his words, the tenfold, 10x improvement in capabilities that are going to be called for to stay ahead are not going to come from platforms and hardware. They're going to come from what I think Jim calls the cognitive sphere. And then when you unpack what he means by the cognitive sphere, I think most laymen would call it the information technology revolution. We're going to harness the information technology revolution, that's how this strategy, this now long-standing strategy of the United States is going to continue to propel itself through the 21st century. And so that felt to me when I heard it like the perfect impetus to what Dave has to say here today. And with that springboard, perhaps I welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'd like to begin by expressing my deep appreciation to the Atlantic Council for the opportunity to share thoughts with you today about information technology and the role I believe it plays in the future of defense. First, thank you, George Lund, who deserves all of our gratitude for making the Captains of Industry series possible, and to Steve, who very ably leads it. Thank you very much. Recently, Army Chief of Staff General Ray Odierno observed, "I could sit here in my chair, pull out my smartphone, and talk to every continent. However, when it comes to the battlefield, I have to bring 50 trucks and 300 soldiers. Why is that? We cannot do that anymore." To the Chief's point, if U.S. forces can no longer take that approach, what can be done? Fortunately, new technologies continue to create efficient ways to communicate on the battlefield. With the consumerization of IT, end users are choosing apps for their tablets and their phones, and even inventing applications. That includes military personnel in the field who are designing apps to help them do their jobs better. We can now say that networks and information are the biggest force multiplier. Wherever warfighters are, they need secure access to real-time information that enables them to dominate and neutralize adversarial forces. I will call this information superiority. So today what I'd like to do is talk to you with what I believe are the three key components for assuring information superiority. First are next generation technologies such as cloud, cybersecurity, big data analytics, and mobility. They deliver best-in-class performance. And for many of them, open source development spurs innovation. Next is the as-a-service business model. It delivers best-in-class efficiency. The third component for assuring information superiority is flexible acquisition and strong program management. This will speed access to next-generation technologies and bring down costs. So what I'd like to do is take a deeper dive into the four next-generation technologies I just mentioned, and we'll start with cloud. Secure access to mission data and enterprise services from anywhere in the world is essential for information superiority. Only cloud computing, distributed over a network, offers capacity, efficiency, and agility. Cloud infrastructure is more affordable and meets surge requirements. In addition, it allows a faster transition from software development to deployment, which we refer to DevOps. Let's talk for a moment about defense in the cloud. DoD owns a mountain of legacy hardware and software, much of which is neither interoperable nor cost-effective. Realizing this, DoD has embarked on an aggressive journey to the cloud. It's rationalizing its IT portfolio and consolidating data centers to cut costs and improve performance. Defense is embracing private clouds and protected enclaves, a great first step toward information security. The Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, and other defense components are exploring commercial cloud services. Cloud computing represents a major technological shift, not unlike the coming of the internet. Today, a consumer could sign on to Amazon, order a virtual PC with software, and save files in the cloud and access them anywhere. Think about this. With a credit card, anyone could quickly set up a computing environment and begin developing software. DoD will take good advantage of cloud computing as it designs and invests in the Joint Information Environment, JIE, an emerging system of federated networks using common standards and configurations. By integrating platforms at sea, on land, in air, and in space, the JIE will enable analytics to be applied rapidly to data from all domains. The JIE will offer DoD-wide infrastructure, enterprise services, and common applications. The military services will continue to operate their parts of the JIE and provide their own unique mission capabilities. The JIE will be a great enabler of information superiority. Both DoD and America's adversaries have access to the internet. The advantage will go to the fastest to innovate and to make decisions. The JIE will help turn fast-moving commercial technology into military systems, enabling U.S. forces to deliver surprises on the battlefield, both real and virtual. So let's talk a little bit about big data analytics, another next-gen technology vital for information superiority. Research shows that companies that do data-driven decision-making enjoy a 5 to 6% increase in productivity over firms that do not. DoD, too, will gain by using more data analytics. This methodology is in the early phase, but it's clearly evolving at breakneck speed. It's important to get on the train. As the velocity of data increases, DoD's Data to Decisions initiative will help assure information superiority. Many defense missions depend on decreasing the time from collection of information to achieving military effect in complex operating environments. U.S. forces must have faster decision cycles than our adversaries. Timely analysis of the explosion of social media and sensor data holds great promise for improving detection and situational awareness. Mobile technologies offer new and accessible tools for information superiority. Real-time mapping will aid military maneuvers in unfamiliar environments. Mobile devices will help identify friend and foe, improve medical diagnoses in the field, and speed logistics in austere locations. Apple's mobile handset revenues alone place the business among the largest in the world, exceeding companies like Microsoft, Intel, and Coca-Cola. Mobility providers such as CSC own or manage hardware and software that enable devices to access enterprise data. They offer self-encrypted and self-contained wireless access and use pre-configured proven technologies and processes that save money. Modular systems enable tailoring for varied users. Real-time monitoring assesses the health of the devices and boosts security. No discussion of information security is complete without cybersecurity. It is fundamental. Defense systems must be resilient enough to fight through successive attacks. To ensure this, DoD is moving to continuous monitoring and fast data analytics. By leveraging cyber experience in both the private and the public sector, a two-way street, large IT companies can speed the adoption of best practices. The Defense Industrial Base Cyber Information Sharing Program does this. DoD shares classified threat information with industrial participants, and in turn, they furnish incident data to DoD. As a charter member, we at CSC leverage insights from our global security operations centers. In fact, our centers sometimes detect new threats before they harm others. These kind of public-private partnerships should grow to encompass the nation's critical infrastructure, but progress to date has been slow. Leveraging next-generation technologies like cloud, big data, mobility, and cyber is the first step to information superiority. It's also important to note that many of these next-generation technologies rely on open-source software. Developed and shared collaboratively by programmers, open-source software plays an increasing role in assuring information superiority. Crowdsourcing drives innovation. Competition between proprietary and open-source software spurs higher quality and increases choices. And hardened security tools are baked into this software. The military services also like open-source software because they do not have to pay licensing fees or lose control of intellectual property. The Defense Intelligence Agency is leveraging open-source innovation through a wiki-style environment. And many new defense business systems are built on open-source Linux operating environment. So now that I've covered the technologies, let me turn to the as-a-service business model, which is accelerating the spread of next-generation technologies. To assure information superiority, enterprises no longer need to own all of the big iron. Rather, they need secure, reliable, and affordable access to computing. Today, defense should buy more of these computing resources as a service from the private sector. DoD would only pay for IT actually consumed, thereby saving money. This is akin to purchasing electricity from a utility. As an example, in buying mobile support as a service, DoD would only pay a monthly subscriber fee. Cloud computing as a service not only brings elasticity, allowing rapid scaling of purchases as needs change, it also improves cost transparency. This advantage helps DoD optimize resource allocation. To satisfy varied needs, cloud computing as a service uses public, private, and hybrid environments. To give one example, a large intelligence agency buys substantial IT as a service from the private sector. The program has slashed network outages by 95%, which is improving reliability. The number of user devices has risen by 2/3, while the number of staff has fallen by 1/4. Users now have virtual desktops, further lowering costs and improving security. In another example, IT-based simulation can be bought efficiently as a service. This is attractive if DoD capital budgets are tight, software advances are frequent, or multiple defense units need access. One military facility uses realistic simulators for 2/5 of its pilot training at a cost of only 8% of its total training budget. The bottom line is that DoD should embrace the as-a-service paradigm and migrate away from a capital-intensive to a capital-light environment. This will be easier to maintain and upgrade and yield more agile and cost-effective IT. By reducing back-office costs, buying IT as a service will improve the tooth-to-tail ratio. The final key ingredient for information superiority is easier acquisition of IT and strong program management. The travails of healthcare.gov last fall highlighted the challenge. President Obama was frank. The way the federal government does procurement and does IT is just generally not efficient. In fact, there's probably no bigger gap between the private sector and the public sector than information technology. The president's statement is very compelling. In a similar vein, a former Army CIO lamented, DoD spends too much on multiple networks that don't talk to one another, data that's hard to access, and technology that takes too long to acquire and field. How can better acquisition and management aid information superiority? Current acquisition rules are cumbersome for fast-moving technology and designed more for buying products than services. Defense tends to focus on many requirements rather than a few key outcomes. In other words, requests for proposals should spell out what DoD wants, but not dwell on how the contractor should do the work. DoD wastes money by buying too many IT assets and too few services. Defense has difficulty enforcing enterprise-wide security architectures. DoD is moving some IT work in-house, even though contractors are efficient and adapt faster. Impending DoD rules may scare off software companies that do not want to expose their commercial data to defense auditors. So how do we change the acquisition playing field in ways that boost information superiority? By the time DoD selects, acquires, installs new IT, it may be obsolete. Defense can avoid this problem by focusing on outcomes and by purchasing IT as a service. Many of DoD's IT challenges relate not to the most exotic technologies, but to implementing proven solutions, basic blocking and tackling. Buying cloud services from the private sector eases this burden while saving money. It's clear that private sector experience in computing for the business enterprise can be critical in helping DoD information superiority. For example, CSC owns and operates the Army's Logistics Modernization Program, one of the world's largest integrated business systems. LMP processes more than 4 million transactions daily and has a response time better than the industry standard. LMP enables certified financial statements as well. As companies seek opportunity to deliver these kind of results, federal acquisition rules rightly promote a level playing field for contractors. It has to be this way. Treating all contractors fairly does not require, however, the kind of adversarial climate that exists today, nor does it mandate closing the door for discussion well before requests for proposals are issued. This contributes to government's IT lag. In the private sector, IT providers and clients treat each other as partners, and clients are laser focused on outcomes, and both invest in the relationship. We at CSC are a strong partner and supporter of small businesses, many of which bring path-breaking innovation. Recently, we acquired 3 such companies in the big data, analytics, and cloud spaces. Small business set-aside rules, however, are sometimes too strict or complicate DoD's pursuit of large-scale enterprise-wide IT programs. On a positive note, the FY14 Defense Authorization Act will allow prime contractors to count small business subcontract dollars at all tiers toward the prime small business goals. DoD needs additional certified acquisition professionals to manage sophisticated IT contracting, and it needs greater numbers of experienced IT professionals to run large or complex programs. Without these resources, DoD risks degraded performance and higher costs when it transitions such programs away from contractors that have shown their ability to run them efficiently. So let me move to management for a minute. Most IT failures arise from poor management, not bad technology. Program managers and system architects who have deep and successful experience across a range of undertakings are the gold standard. They succeed for a reason. Like sports stars, they are not born but made. DoD should follow leading-edge companies and centralize IT resources under the CIO. This offers more potential for enterprise-wide approaches and scale efficiencies. The CIO ought to be more than just a policy leader. Transformation of obsolete IT-based systems requires active engagement by top management. It must take ownership of these changes. Let me cite two examples of how management can affect outcomes. I mentioned one earlier, healthcare.gov. It went live without sufficient end-to-end testing. Just 2 weeks before launch, a requirement was levied to keep users from browsing insurance plans before they enrolled to buy one. This became a single point of failure. The second example involves modernization of business systems. Thousands in DoD are outdated. Integrated systems work best when the processes are aligned with the commercial off-the-shelf software, such as those made by SAP and Oracle. Overly customizing business systems may cause them to fail and will increase the future burden of updating software. The big efficiency gains come from using the business systems right out of the box. DoD is transforming its electronic health records, and they ought to facilitate proper access while protecting privacy. Transformation should enhance clinical interoperability and modernize care coordination. Another management challenge is that the defense sector is becoming less competitive in attracting IT talent, especially in a down federal market and in an up commercial market. The competition for talent for IT is Silicon Valley. It's not the contractors in the Beltway. IT workforces are mobile and responsive to opportunity. Federal furloughs and pay freezes have turned talent away. The low-priced, technically acceptable contracting environment reduces capacity to pay for talent. Thus, job insecurity is now a major worry for the contractor IT workforce. So let me conclude by referring back to General Odierno's statement. We shouldn't have to bring 50 trucks and 300 soldiers to communicate on the battlefield. Today, warfighters have access to mobile phones, tablet computers, and instant information in their personal lives. They want and need this information superiority on the battlefield. Together with the private sector, DoD can achieve it quickly, affordably, and reliably. The key is to rely more on the three ingredients we've discussed today: next-generation technologies, the as-a-service business model, and sound acquisition and management. Thank you.
Terrific. Terrific. Thanks very much. So if my ambition for this series is to get senior business leaders to talk about the public interests their companies serve and the public policies that shape their markets, Dave's address could not have done better to fulfill that expectation and ambition. So thanks very, very much. It really was right on spot. What we're going to do here is I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then I would invite and encourage those of you in the audience to ask some questions and try and develop many of these ideas that Dave's already talked about, perhaps introduce some new ones if you want as well. I would remind that we are fully on the record, and therefore when I do call on you to speak, please wait for a microphone, stand up, and introduce yourself. Let me get in a couple questions right from the start. You know, it would be I think everyone in this audience was too polite to say duh, But a number of the things that you were calling for from the perspective of people who use Amazon and other cloud-based services, buy IT as a service, et cetera, say, duh. And so here's what that question, how that realization turns in my mind. I put the economist hat on, and I've got one of those, and say, so there's a market failure here somewhere, right? Where it's not like the Pentagon's not spending a lot of money on information technology and information superiority in the warfighting realm. And it's not like there isn't an industry of companies out there ready to sell businesses, et cetera. So there's a market failure there somewhere. And I have two hypotheses as to where what is the source of that market failure, what I'll call market failure, and I'm interested in your reaction to it. One is still security. I wonder if particularly the defense customers reflex to own and therefore control and therefore, in principle or by reflex, be able to better assure the security of this stuff is one of those market failures. Let me just start with that without piling on too heavily. Is that right? And how could, if it is there an antidote to it?
Yeah, no, so I think that the use of security is somewhat of an excuse, much more than a reason. I mean, clearly, securing data is a critical component. I mean, in the commercial space, all you have to look at is what happened with Target and the personal information that had gone out. But I think that there's a couple of tools in our tool bag that allows companies or the Department of Defense to leverage the next generation technologies that we're talking about without compromising on security. Public data that the Defense Department uses, how they access, how they reach out to people and how people reach into the department, can be used on a public cloud versus a private cloud. Mm-hmm. You can leverage private cloud capabilities to do those types of things. Policy is as important as the technology. And so I view security as an important component of what we do, but it is clearly not an inhibitor for us to be able to leverage commercial technology moving forward.
But I think you are affirming that there is that reflex there,
absolutely.
And that is one of the barriers to getting companies to get with the getting your government customers to get with the 21st century.
Absolutely, right? I think that is a barrier to some of what we're talking about.
Let me keep pulling that thread. With the calamity of what happened to Target just 3 months ago in one's mind, where is the state of the art in securing data? Right. Were they just bad at what they did, make a managerial error, or is the state of the art still vulnerable to the enterprising hacker, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that it's not fair for me. I mean, I don't have enough information to comment on that.
I almost regret having used that as the reference point. Understandably.
I mean, the point that we talked about in my remarks with regard to sharing, I think that the way that we can improve our defense against cybersecurity is to create an environment where threats are identified early on and the information regarding those threats are shared across industry and across government and industry as well. Mm-hmm. As I said, the DIB works quite well, but it's a narrow type of environment. I think that we have a global security operations centers across the globe that enable us to identify threats early in the process, and we share that data amongst ourselves. But I think there needs to be a vehicle for us to share data across industries.
I get it. I just think it is worth observing how different a paradigm of security that is, this, if you will, open source, sort of market-based security, than every reflex that has been built up in the defense industry in particular over, generations.
But in this case, information is power.
Got it. Yeah. No, but again, I'm trying to figure out why can't the government customer get with the 21st century? And there are, in other words, it's not just because they're stupid or there are reasons. There are cultural and even cognitive reasons. So the other market defect that I wanted to ask you about is actually something we talked about when we were huddling before coming in here, and that is, to put it in a fancy way, the high discount rate that government customers tend to apply to their purchasing decisions, or to put it more simply, their sort of reversion to commodities because they don't have knowledge perhaps of the technology, and they certainly don't have confidence in the future of the budgets that would be necessary to see through some of the more transformational changes that would be implied by technology, blah, blah. So is it this, again, my formulation of it, too high a discount rate? Is that the other market failure that's in play here?
I think the other market failure here is I would define it two ways. Number one, the ability to generate an ROI, a return on investment, in the government space, tends to put investment in IT on the back burner, and so we need to figure out a way in which we can generate a government return on investment. I think the other, in particular, around this time period is my sense is that our customers are starting to be more open to what we're trying to accomplish across the board, and are very interested in talking to us more and more about the next generation technologies. Quite frankly, I think the budget situation up until now, living in a continuing resolution environment and not really understanding what their budgets will be going forward, has led folks to buy for the day versus buying for the future. I like it. We talked about this a little bit during right after September 11th. We had there was a lot of money going from the federal government to the states, and so we expected the states to buy these high technology ways to protect the homeland, with command centers and those types of things. But what they did was they bought guns, boots, radios, things like that, because they didn't know how much money they were going to get and how long it was going to last. And I think being able to establish that, getting back to more consistent budget process, will absolutely accelerate the advancement of next generation technology.
Certainly that analog to state and local governments in the early part of the century is fair to the fiscal crisis and confusion that's been going on for the last 3-4 years, right? Who's going to make an investment that requires 3 or 4 years of money if they don't know whether the budget is going up, down, sideways?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I have one other question, and then I will turn to the audience, and it comes back to one of the now persistent themes of this Captains of Industry series, which is the degree to which really the commercial technology base is outrunning the government and even the defense technology base, and the implications of that. Again, significance of which is it's a completely different paradigm from the paradigm that this industry and the military grew up in throughout the 20th century. You've alluded to that. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit, and maybe even to some degree quantify how disparate are the information technology bases that the commercial world and the government world are working in.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I would put it another way. I think that the enterprise IT, whether it be in the government or in the commercial space, is really being driven by the consumer, kind of an outside-in perspective. So if you're the CIO of a federal agency, or you're the CIO of a bank, what drives your IT decisions are really coming from the consumer space. We talked about that: smartphones, tablets. I mean, those are the types of tools that people use every day, and that's what they expect to see in the workplace. And so it's really a consumer-driven IT environment, much more than commercial enterprise, business-to-business type activities. And I think that actually it bodes well for us as we look forward, because more and more of our customers are becoming more accustomed to using those personal devices, and they're starting from their own lives, and starting to make those same demands to their CIOs as is happening in
the General Odierno quote.
Right, exactly, absolutely.
Is right on spot. But I'm gonna reiterate the question. Are we a generation behind in government IT, or how would you perhaps quantify or character or qualify it?
I used to be a generation.
Literally.
Yeah. I think that right now, we're getting a lot closer. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of organizations adopting, for example, email as a service, moving to, we talk about organizations moving to the cloud, mobility becoming more and more, discussions around bring your own device. The gap is closing, and it's closing very fast. And again, I think that some stability around the budget will start to drive that gap even faster.
Okay. Okay, I would be happy to take questions from those of you here in the audience if you have some. I see a question. All you got to do is raise your hand, and I'll keep track of you. Right here, please.
Good morning, Daniel Zaberi with Tech Mission Secure. We've been a cybersecurity provider in government since 2001, and my focus is based on kind of like some continuity here. So we've seen DoD go from their old DIA-CAP model to the standard government-wide DIA-RMF model. Do you think that as we approach cloud computing, government's going to have a unified approach to cloud computing both on the civil side and the DoD side?
Yes, I do.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Could you help people like me understand that question?
Go ahead. I'll let you. Okay. I'll let you start, and then I'll pile on.
In I guess most recently, in 2002, the government passed the Federal Information Security Management Act, so well as what's known as FISMA. Prior to that, it was called GISRA, the Government Information Security Reform Act.
I'm with you.
So after 2002, there were many different approaches taken to try and tackle cybersecurity in the government space. And about, I guess, 2.5, 3 years ago, the government finally landed on a thing called RMF, the Risk Management Framework, which is a 6-step cycle, which ends with continuous monitoring to kind of secure their IT resources through both processes, paper, and actual technology this time. And government on the DoD side had a model called the DoD DIA-CAP model, the Defense Information Certification Accreditation Process, which is this multi-tiered, very chaotic process, which was very hard to implement. DoD finally gave up and said, you know what, civil government finally tackled this. Let's go ahead and take this approach. And the civil side is pretty much, the standards are run by NIST, the Department of Commerce Agency, National Institute of Standards and Technology. So DoD finally adopted the same model that the civil government was using because it finally was effective. So we have this whole disparity, you know, the government, the NIST model, the civil model, has this whole cloud situation, which is actually starting to work. And DoD has these multiple enclaves, secure and not, which really don't play with one another. So we're seeing that if DoD thinks they're going to take the same approach and say, hey, civil agencies got it right, are we going to go towards that model as well?
Thank you. Thank you.
So that long question, my answer is yes. I think it makes sense, and I think that they will, based on the previous experience, will migrate to that.
But if I may, further to another question relevant to a previous question I asked, so there's an indication, his question, your answer, that indeed the security market barrier is beginning to recede, that there's beginning to gain some confidence in commercial-like, or at least civil-like standards for security, information security. That's how I heard this exchange. Yeah. Fair? Okay. Other questions? John Pranzatelli.
Hi, I'm John Pranzatelli, MBDA. I'll try and ask a question, Steve, that's self-evident on its first. Dave, it's more about the sheer quantity of data. You know, we're on the military equipment side of the DoD, and we're beginning to encounter, as an example, a notion of every platform has a sensor, every activity gathering intelligence, which promises to pour a tremendous amount of data and information in through the kinds of systems that you guys are providing. Right. So I wonder if you have a perspective on that, or if you see that as a problem or an opportunity, or both.
Yeah. So it's a great question, John, and I see that as a huge opportunity. And again, we talked a little bit about big data analytics and the migration from SQL databases to combination of structured and unstructured data, and now social media, sensors, and all those types of things. And I think that as we look forward and as we look at analytics, the capability that exists out in the market space to be able to process large amounts of data into actionable intelligence, whether it be for a Facebook or for the Department of Defense, is just an incredible opportunity for both the government and for the commercial space. So it's a very exciting time.
Actually, that brings to my mind, you're going to actually have to indulge me, but I hope in a manner that will interest others besides. A question that I actually have wanted to ask someone, and I suddenly realize I'm sitting next to someone who probably knows the answer.
Maybe not.
So, I'm quite delighted by these Jason Bourne movies, right? The Bourne, whatever they're called. And in almost all of these movies, there comes a sequence, an episode in the movie that the one that is prominent in my mind is a guy is walking through a train station in London, and a bunch of intelligence analysts back in New York are trying to find him before the bad guy finds him. And so suddenly in the movie, there's all this, frankly, data fusion. And they're tapping into surveillance cameras, and they're tapping into cell phones, and all sorts of other things. And in fairly real time, which is simply to say really fast, they are putting this together, finding the guy. He gets shot in the end. But what I want to know is that somewhere close to the state of the art? That degree of fusion of commercial, civil, practically random sensors and data, and the ability to pull those together?
Well, two things. The last movie I saw was the Lego movie. So,
Okay.
But
great movie, though.
It was a great movie.
Movie.
For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a great movie. I'll rent you my kid if you need an excuse to go. I would give you an analogy, right? I'm walking, coming down here, walking by a store that I've bought stuff in before, and all of a sudden on my cell phone a coupon pops up for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, the ability to know where you are, what you're doing, those types of things. I mean, it exists in the commercial space every time I get one of those coupons. So I think the state of the art is moving pretty rapidly in that direction.
My instinct about my own answer to that question is all the technology is available. It really is a system integration problem. If we have the technology, but we don't have the system necessarily yet to do these things. We're so fast. Steve Irwin, and then I'll come to you, sir.
Steve Irwin with Avocent. I'm curious to what extent you're able to leverage CSC's broader commercial operations, and operationally, how does that work? Or do you experience the same sort of disconnect that DoD encounters, just in terms of ability to access the technology, the people, the insights that they've developed in the commercial world?
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve. We're going through a fairly significant transformation at CSC as we move the company into the ability to generate these next generation infrastructure and then help our customers migrate their applications to that. And a part of what we're doing is putting together the commercial business and the public sector business from an ability to take what we're doing in the commercial space and migrate it to the public sector space. And the best part about it is, back to I think an earlier question that you asked, our customers are demanding it. So when we go in to see our customers in the government space, they want to know what we're doing for Zurich. They want to know what we're doing for the insurance industry or the banking industry and things like that, because what they're looking for in light of the fiscal austerity is they want proven solutions that work and save them money. So it's really been a very much a refreshing perspective for us, because in the past it was hard for the two organizations to work together, but it's absolutely, the barriers are down, and what we're doing is we're taking the offerings that our commercial guys are getting, we're federalizing them and being able to deliver them to our public sector clients. So it's working out quite well.
So in the hardware business, correct me if I'm wrong, John, that problem usually runs up against a CAS, a cost accounting barrier. Is that not so true in an information technology business, or have you just figured it out?
No, in the information technology business, because we have commercial pricing, we're able to sell those types of activities as on a commercial basis.
Okay.
So.
Okay, excellent. Sir.
Thank you. This is Lane Smith. I'm a retired USAID officer and have been dealing with information technology for development for about 20 years. The question that I would put out there would be sort of the so what. Your private customers want to do things better so they can save money to get where they want to go.
Right.
But when you look at a DOD or a USAID or other kinds of things like that, there's no real sense of, after I get all this, well, how do I use that to change the way I do my business and get to my ends?
Right.
So is CSC actually focused on what used to be called change management, that is getting organizations to reframe how they do it?
Absolutely, and example. I mean, there's multiple examples around that, but from a so what perspective, a couple things. Number one is improving the back office. Payroll, HR, those types of things allows you to put more money towards the tooth, right? So it's about improving the tooth to tail ratio. To your point around changing the processes to become more effective and more efficient allows you to improve mission effectiveness. The so what in getting it right is not taking information technology and just recreating what you already do on a new computer, right, or computerizing it. What it's doing is using that opportunity to assess and validate the processes that you're using, make the changes, and either align them to how they're done in the commercial space and how the software supports it, thereby is saving money, or by making fundamental changes to the software, but in small increments. And so to the end of your question, we at CSC do support our clients in the transformation phase. I think I mentioned it earlier in the talk. It's not about the technology anymore, right? It's change management. It's about changing the culture, how you do things, why you do things, those types of things. That's the hard part. Technology is not hard anymore.
No, I agree. That's the thing we struggle with.
Right. Yep.
Martin, 1 second, please, so we can get a microphone in your hand. Right behind you.
I'm Martin van Heuven, Atlantic Council. I'm really out of my depth in this subject, so forgive me for the simplicity of this question, but I want to go back to General Odierno and his line of trucks and his 300 men. If I take everything you told us, what should we imagine the next battlefield will look like, and specifically, how should soldiers be equipped? I imagine that the commander of a Navy vessel will want certain systems and certain hardware to provide those systems. Same for the Air Force pilot and same for the Army, but they will not all be the same. So what does this U.S. Armed Force that you were pointing at look like?
Yeah. In response to the general's comment around all the infrastructure that's required to talk on the battlefield, I think that being able to buy, and again, I'm just speaking off the cuff, being able to buy commercial access to certain areas, so that regular iPhones or Samsung phones or whoever, it doesn't matter, using those versus the large amounts of equipment is a way to do that. Being able to leverage the various platforms using state-of-the-art technology versus data technology, from a speed, from a mission effectiveness, leveraging the cloud to and some of the new techniques they have around big data for the warfighter to be able to grab various pieces of information and do assessments in real time, have the individual on the field be able to make adjustments to applications or write their own applications to process the information as it changes in real time. Those types of things. I think it's giving more autonomy to the end user is probably one of the bigger changes that we would see going forward.
Is there a particular, dare I use a little systems engineering jargon here, critical path to realizing that vision? Is there some long pole in that tent that we all ought to be focused on, or you guys?
My sense is it's around process and policy. I mean, I think that's
technology.
I mean, it's not technology. I think it's process and policy. I know. And this my comment may be a little dated, but police officers, they have their police radio, but they have their cell phone, right? And they rely on their smartphone as much as they rely on, and so those types of things occur And I mean, we have. I was talking to one individual who was talking about the fact that they have. They've issued iPads to some of their soldiers, and they've been doing things with the iPads that he now has to kind of rein in and kind of figure out how to make sure that what they're doing is calculating battle weights and those types of things is in line with what's going on in the so there's a lot. I mean, I think it's around policy. I really do. Policy.
I thought I saw a hand out of the corner of my eye. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Jordan Thomas, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, and now a student at George Mason. So I've got two things to talk about. First one is kind of like a perspective when I was in the military, and has to do with we were talking about the security. I think what we really want to mention is it's really the classification of the data, because all the information has to be secure. When you talk about the classification about who can see it and who can control it, it may be a better way to explain what you're talking about when you use that. So that's my point of order there. My question is, you mentioned that CSE is a charter member of the Public-Private Sharing Threat Information, and you mentioned that the progress has been slow. From your perspective, is that a matter of regulation? Is that a matter of incentives for monetary incentives?
Right.
Why is it slow, and what can be done to speed it up? Thank you.
Yeah. So first off, thank you very much for your service. I really appreciate that. The comment. Well, let me put the comment back in context. The DIB was not about the DIB. It was about the rest of 5/6 of our nation's critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector, and we're still not doing sharing the information we need to share across those types of things. So it's really adopting the good work that goes on in the DIB to the public sector. I'm sorry, the private sector. That was what the comment was about. So I apologize for that.
Clark, did you have a question?
Hi, I'm Clark Bowen. I'm the Navy fellow here, and probably be best described as a customer on the DoD side of the IT services. And I'll tell you my perspective, and my question isn't part of the problem the size? You've got DISA in their role, you've got the services, the agencies, each one has their own authorities, policies, their buying capabilities, and it seems like as I go from a Navy ship to a shore, to a joint command, to another agency, it's all discombobulated, and it just can't seem to get it together, and that seems to be part of the problem. Everybody talks about cloud, everybody talks about where to go forward, but because everybody's approaching it differently, isn't that part of the problem that's always going to cause the DoD to kind of waste a lot of money to try to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, as long as you have multiple CIOs, and then you have what we refer to as shadow IT, where people have credit cards and go set up environments on Amazon and things like that, you'll always have that situation, and whether you're in the commercial space or the public sector, and that goes back to the discussion around it's not around the technology, it's around getting the policy right and getting the structure right, and some of the centralization that we talked about. I know that's a tough thing, but that's how you resolve some of these issues that you've talked about.
But permit me to ask, on the other hand, isn't that problem pretty much akin to the commercial world? A DISA is an enterprise every bit as big as most of your commercial customers. So's the Navy. So are small parts of the Navy. So isn't diversity also beautiful?
Well, let's see. So
maybe even efficient. More importantly,
a couple of comments on that. The activity that we were talking about really it's better handled in the commercial space because the role of the CIO is much stronger in most commercial companies. CIO has the budget. His or her customer are the various users, and opting out of leveraging the CIO usually isn't permitted. Okay. My words, but there are issues with that. Having said that, there are areas where there is opportunity to be able to take private clouds, public clouds, and to leverage them across the enterprise, but it's a conscious effort, right? I mean, we talked about this early on. Public-facing data should be on a public cloud to do that. There's highly classified data, depending on how you define it, should be in a behind the firewall, secured, those types of things. And the challenge and what companies like CSC are able to do are to help our customers manage their different workloads and manage the data so that it optimizes the best platform for the end result. So that's really kind of the challenge.
Sorry, I'm going to persist in this one more refining question. So you're not saying we need the CIO of the Department of Defense to decide how we're going to buy all sorts of IT across this entire unprecedentedly large enterprise, but you are saying you need some CIOs with authority in the large activities. Am I hearing that right?
Let's see. I mean, ideally, and again, this is now since we're here, I can be a little academic.
Okay. Oh, by all means.
Ideally, you'd have
Don't tell Fred Kemp.
You'd have
okay.
a single CIO, control all the budget, be able to drive the framework and those types of things. The enterprise framework, and be able to really kind of articulate the vision and the execution of it. Having said that, now we'll go back to reality. That may not be the case, but you have to have some form of centralization, whether it be by service or at some other level, but at a higher level than I think what we do now.
Okay, fine. Is there another question?
That was fun, by the way.
Good. That was fun dancing around
exactly,
in the academia,
exactly.
Theoretical world. I have one other question, and then we will glide our way right to an on-time arrival. I'm going to confess that as I got to know CSC through Bill and through working with you in preparation for this, I came to understand in a way that I hadn't the degree to which what I think of as desktop IT and what I think of as warfighting IT are actually not so separate problems, or as importantly, industries. Am I right about that, or is your company one that just happens to overlap the two?
No, I think that think of technology as a tool, right? And the end uses. The way to think about it is the car, right? I mean,
okay.
So we'll use a Mercedes.
Good.
Okay? Yeah. So the Mercedes, they have the E-Class or whatever, right? And so think of IT as the E-Class, but the warfighter may want sunroof and windshield wipers and things like that. The desktop guy may just need air conditioning, and so at the core is the frame and the engine and things like that. But then how you leverage that and how you use it is really dependent on the mission, and so it's not that different.
Even if, boy, I may break the metaphor here, even if the Mercedes is a missile and not a desktop.
Yeah, even if the Mercedes is a missile, not a desktop.
Or that Mercedes in the analog, I should not go here, could be a desktop, could be a missile.
Could be.
Okay. Okay. Good. God, that was perhaps an unsettling moment on which to try to draw this to a close, and yet I suppose I'm going to, even so. I'm going to hold the very last word. Permit me, if I may, to ask you to lay on us your final closing thoughts.
No, I'm very, very excited about the future of this industry, both from a private sector perspective and from our customers in the U.S. government. One of the things that we love about CSC and working in the industry is that the things that we do hopefully make our customers' lives easier and safer. And it's a great industry to be a part of, and the technology is truly a force multiplier in keeping the U.S. ahead of its adversaries.
Thanks very much. Certainly the way I heard it, my own just capstone on this goes like this, and that is some of to the extent that I welcome feedback on this series, and I get it, and some of the feedback I've gotten is, gee, your speakers they're not really putting their finger very firmly on the problems. And I think, if I may, Dave has done a really nice job of actually calling out some problems, some real fundamental problems, but at the same time, I think you've left me with the impression that you know, the first derivative is positive. The trend line is good here. Glass half full, maybe more simply. And so I've learned something there, and I think interesting, and leaves me hopeful. So I also wanted to reserve the final word to make a plug for the next 2 events in this series, both of which are now on the calendar. John Jumper, the CEO of Leidos, who is maybe his valedictory address, let's say. He's announced his retirement from the firm. That's on April 17th, right here. And then on April 30th, so 2 events in April, April 30th, Tom Enders, the chairman, chief executive officer of Airbus Group, formerly known as EADS. He also will be here that day to make a Captains of Industry address. So, thanks very, very much, Dave, for adding to this series in a really profound way. I appreciate it.